I had 3 sips of my lukewarm beverage, coffee in the break room when Sarah from HR inserted her icy blonde head and the statement, "Dana, can we chat real quick?" Real quick is corporate jargon for, "We're going to eat you alive," and I followed her since she smiled as we went. Past the same interns I was seeing down the hall trained outside of the server room last summer. I debugged myself during the massive 21's crash into that sterile small, encountering the cave where dreams end Sarah. There were already 2 suits waiting. Sitting crow-like on the corner of the finances table, Tom wouldn't accommodate my eye, but I was aware that something wasn't simply off, it was going to undergo surgery. "Tone leaking," said Dana Sarah. "With phony pity, the business has been conducting some soul-searching, and because reorganizing and maximizing your costs role is being withdrawn, much like I am a fucking cruise," I nodded once. "All right, Sarah." She blinked, not anticipating calm most people beg for options in a panic. "I've spent 15 years in this building. I've witnessed 4 rebrands and 6 CEOs throughout the years, and I've survived 2 stock crashes. The riddle of the vending machine mold on floor 2 Gary from procurement and leak. I've written the fucking vendor matrix that I continue to onboard contractors. Witness the taming of half of my code by agile consultants who are wearing all ego and birds. But then the real Tom cleared his throat with a gut punch. And there's one option. If you're intrigued, a hybrid support. Position is being created on it would be part-time for facilities staff, but it mainly keeps you on the team. Cleaning tasks, such as refilling, maybe minimal custodial employment, caused my brain to stop working for a moment. I believed he had misspoken. "Offering me a mop," I said in a hushed voice. Sarah's laughter was too bright. "Mop, this is a chance for transition. Consider it a form of cross-functional synergy." I heard something jolt inside of me, but loud, unflashy, and just like I grinned as I zippered a corpse bag, and more than anything else, that smile frightened them. Yelling could be grateful for the opportunity. I answered, "I think I'll go, but I'm rising." Investigate further forms of collaboration, and I left, yelling, without crying, just a deep beneath the skin, a silent explosion. 15 years of allegiance submitted under another costs and entered HR's digital trash can, which they had already sent the email to remove my access to the system. Prior to the elevator striking the lobby, I received home, removed my apartments, and poured the My Inbox pinging with the last of the boxed wine. I assumed it was spam. But it wasn't still interested in the subject line. I gazed at the consultation, which was from Blake. A former acquaintance I made years ago at the Denver vendor gathering. He had brought up a strategic acquisitions by a side company, inquired if I would ever like to pick up. At the time, I had disregarded contract job. However, I opened it tonight before I tell me what transpired next, please. I'm attempting to hit my first modest favor, 10,000 members, and I guarantee the story only gets stranger after this. In case you haven't already assisted a girl out, is free and brimming with, "Where were we now? Corporate karma. Let's discuss about Blake's." I typed back one line. The email was brief, with only 2 phrases, and an electronic business card from a company I had never heard of, Marlowe Strategic. "I hope all is fine with you, Dana. Whether you're amenable to working part-time, we're conducting research and advisory work on I need someone to help with a couple IT operations plays. Nobody truly understands what the hell there. When I looked at it 4 months ago, I never said that duct-taping Heritage was too busy. Software for the parasitic, ungrateful people at Devlin Group Inc., SRAS, where I used to work and disguised as the current garbage fire." I sat drinking wine in my living room sweatpants. Simmering anger behind a slumbering silence, similar like a house burning under a sheet of ice, I replied, "But it's still open." "What kind of work?" I sent it without rereading it. Second guess, because the me that received an opportunity to work as a janitor, but was dead, and the person typing was now proficient in Blake's bloodless retaliation 12 hours later. Voice. That is equally as relaxed as I recalled the type that makes you imagine a man with an excessive number of watches, and never rides a coaster. Instead, we have an... He said, "Have you heard of Bannon?" Holdings. I only ever laughed when I had. To handle their emergency reports, Devlin's parents' silence on the... "Wait a beat," he said slowly. "Spent 15 years working for Devlin Jesus. We are going to begin conducting due diligence on neither they nor I knew anything about them." Laughed. "You want in?" I replied. "Send the 10 minutes later NDA, the doc touched down." I skimmed, the tight, aggressive ironclad. Signed and returned it so quickly that I hardly observed the smile that had begun crawling over my face because they desired I was the vendor system, so I was the vendor risk. I wrote half the legal flags that I wanted. Contract is still collecting dust in their SharePoint graveyard was looking for someone who might sift through a business's soul using a scalpel and locate the growth. Constructed the fucking tumor over which we met. Zoom's due diligence. The following day, some PDFs were too thin in the folder. List of major clients with poor organizational charts as well as established system dependencies that read as though someone was attempting to win a third round via bluffing. I asked one question throughout the interview. "Who's Blake?" Your system's architecture lead raised a technical eyebrow, meaning that if you say yes, I replied, and then I was integrated, not unemployed. Badge, desk, pizza, and swag mug Friday, but I had access to something better. Purpose a business full of arrogant jerks who was still unaware of what had just entered the battlefield. Let's now discuss the provision I buried in the vendor contract from 2017, the one something that's going to make someone's M and the crew from Department Cry Blake discarded the data into the Devlin shared drive. Phase 1 of due diligence was a digital expiring landfill of half-baked reports spreadsheets for audit trails created by those who obviously believed in conditional. The formatting seemed magical, so I opened one infrastructure-labeled folder summary and truly burst up laughing. It contained a diagram of the system that hadn't been updated since before the cloud architecture continued to be cited. Servers that we shut down in 2019 and classified under the owners of security protocols, Dana M. Tilden's name is still there, spelled incorrectly, but I dug deeper. The corporation was unaware of how bad things were getting. They were a spaghetti jumble of sorts. Entering a software audit that isn't ongoing, unclear comprehension of the third duct glued party plugins into crucial systems that they didn't even understand. The dashboard for customer support was using an outdated API that had received a vendor alert 18 flag. Devlin never made the payment for the patch, simply redirected traffic in the hopes those contracts I opened went unnoticed. A vendor-exclusive master PDF agreement in 2017 and experienced a chilling effect up my spine. Section B, Clause 7. 3, page 4. I had written it and battled for it, while yelling at each other in legal's box office glass when some hotshot executives wished to take shortcuts and avoid language of exclusivity in the case of purchase or transfer of assets. All related vendor rights turn into non-transferable right away unless renegotiated at the initial price terms and approval from both parties. For example, if Devlin attempted to sell themselves, each and every one of their exclusive contracts would burn in court, unless they had clear writing acceptance at the initial rates that were absurdly low in comparison to today's norms. I underlined the part that was dropped. Comment on a possible acquisition roadblock. I opened a new Lucid and saw the urgent flag. I began sketching and mapping the chart document. Out of every system I have ever interacted with, integration for all unrecorded failovers. Every foolish shortcut we had to action when an executive requested agility optimization without financial constraints. The Devlin's digital intestinal blueprint erupted from me like bile I had created a war map by the time I finished. Thus specific, I could almost see where the initial payment would be spread by the rot. Handling a risky inventory sync threadbare compliance with customer data, you don't want to know that I gave each system a label. With its preservation of dependent scores, latency, and the most recent audit that is known to which never got finished. And at the 90% of the time, I dropped a message in the bottom corner. Platforms are still used by the stack. I personally designed it. There were no upgrades. Redundancy. You are the owner of them. I sat back and gazed at the failures. Not with honor, not even with bitterness, is just an oddly obvious satisfaction, such as identifying the illness that nearly took your life because I was no longer recording a business. That evening, while excavating a burial, I received a Blake's Slack ping. OMG, this map gold. And Blake, it's not gold. Gas. 2 evenings. Later, I signed in. The internal vendor portal for Devlin out of pure morbid curiosity, and almost I dropped my tea since I wasn't yet in administration. Level full rights, but sufficient. Apparently, someone had departed from the consultant profile is likely active. Marked it for deletion in the upcoming and hourly rendition of spring for the quarterly sweep cleaning, but I was currently a ghost in the system is blocked and has no alarms. Credentials just to quietly enter a dusty nook of a business that still believed I was lost and I didn't hack anything. I clicked, but the spoof didn't get past security. I had been using the same URL for 3 years, entered the same information, and presto. I was Dana M. Tilden Strategic there. Liaison for operations with a consultant tag. I have my digital name, badge hanging there. I clicked like a toe tag on a corpse. Vendor archive, waited, and hit master. Contracts waited once more, and it appeared. 6 weeks ago, a master vendor list was updated. The wait was shown in slow motion as the PDF opened, of it resting on my shoulders as though I should not have taken an old coat. Off of pages and pages of contracts, names in the addendums clause stacks that I hadn't observed in years of third-party logistics analytics of consumer behavior that are sleeped in 2020, we onboarded a deprived startup. Most likely, that was still running cold. Brew and hope, and it's on page 19. Was Clause 14B hidden away like a minefield? Beneath 7 boilerplate levels, in the event of a transfer of corporate ownership, customer exclusivity and service delivery will be regarded as invalid until revised agreement with the original signatory conditions of a certified continuity. I recalled writing that agreement. Phrase that I recalled being lawful with my blood claiming that it was excessively combative. I recalled winning, and that provision now was still in effect on numerous contracts. Pipelines throughout the entire infrastructure that are all connected to a brief passage that might become selling them, because you can't sell what no longer has legal status. After acquiring the file, I downloaded it, lawfully using my still active profile, and shut down the window after logging out. Deleted the device's history and destroyed it. ID I was taking, not breaking in. A list of the things I have already rebuilt. I dropped Blake's team on the Zoom, transfer the file to our secure channel, and typed a single line that said, "They can't sell what? They are unable to transfer, and nobody has replied for Blake." Applied a red flag tag for a full minute, and sent it to legal, where I sat in the dark, allowing it to settle. They believed they erased me, but it appears that they simply archived me and failed to remember that I still had the keys. The cafe smelled, which is bad for the janitor. Like scalding coffee and waking you up, know the nice half-ass put-together acoustic indie song covers for furniture, things had previously had significance, and tables crowded with individuals acting as though Slack is I was at the corner one with personality. Open laptop while drinking a beverage that contained having the gall to charge $9 and yet taste good. Blake was across like guilt and almonds, from me hammering on his Mac as though he was distributing a bomb to 2 analysts in junior next. To us, murmuring over financial models like children studying for exams, we were putting the finishing touches on the product that would strike Dev like a sledgehammer. The boardroom table was very tight. Lovely. Then LinkedIn buzzed on my phone. Alert. Brian Keller has published an update on the human CEO of Brian Keller Dellen, a man whose LinkedIn post came to life. Only the ability to live long enough to ascend the ladder and persuade others, I clicked it out of the people he had built. Habit. And it was present in all its glory. Leadership and corporate gaslighting is about vision rather than popularity. Leaner options are made possible by difficult choices, futures that are more resilient. This season, our team is demonstrating. Of change included a picture of him, grinning while standing in front of a glass wall, crossed arms, appearing to be a rejected stock image of a considerate executive. Hell Shakya resilience, leadership makeover. I nearly choked on Tuesday. "Hey, Blake," on my pricey latte, I said, slanting my screen in his direction. The way they are attempting to market themselves as a more efficient process, yes. Here, their fearless leader has a past of postponing IT audits in order to reduce expenses, and he also postponed it for at least 2 years. Last year's significant license renewals and turned it into a Blake emergency. "You're certain I was the one, right?" Blinked. He was the one who ignored him shouting about it. He gestured to one of the reports. "The system risk is identified by analysts, adding additional information regarding audit errors." Both of them began typing as if they were burning. I continued to read Brian's post. Had 400 likes, primarily from former interns and industry bootlickers wishing to scale a ladder. He would most likely someone tore them out from under them. Another person added, "Inspiring. True leadership." I chuckled. Quiet, cutting-edge surgery because I understood what was approaching. Brian believed he was riding. The storm was unaware that it was already within the structure, donning his outdated consultant credential and grinning as the devil-consuming decaf. Wasn't only Schadenfreude was replaced by precision. Each sentence he wrote turned into one more breadcrumb, one more piece of information we might be incorporated into our acquisition risk. Report that our crowbar was his vanity. The knife wasn't a liability, but vision was. It had already been sharpened. The nicest part, pressed to the bone, gave it to me directly, and it began with "Ellie texted you to ask if you're complying." Okay, that's all. No background, no follow-up. Like I'd been in a vehicle accident rather than a then cost-cutting spreadsheet. Slaughter Marcia in vendor operations brought another one. They're inconsolable because Keller just withdrew us into a huddle and said a word. Uncertain about enhancing legal exposure, half of the group believes that we're getting acquired. Other half believes that layoffs are imminent. When no one else is sleeping, Scott is the one. I used to complain about vending machines. Delivered. A message that truly made I burst out laughing in the midst of a whatever is going on. It smells. As chaotic as you are, if you're blinked twice, but I didn't blink. Didn't respond or provide them with what we truly want to know if you're doing this, as I wasn't harming them in any way. Simply put, they were too near the match, as the fuse eventually detected that I received an email that same day. Topic: Reestablishing contact with Sarah Holtz HR like a horrible sequel. No one said hello. "I hope all is fine with you, Dana. I wanted to touch base to see if you might think about going back. In a temporary advisory capacity, we're reviewing some of your systems, and your knowledge of the past could be very beneficial. To the leadership group, while we investigate a few organizational changes, organizational pivots couldn't self-help. No apologies. No ownership, merely a tacky attempt to staple a jump to the rear of an aircraft already I read about nose-diving into a canyon. 3 times, then archived it without receiving a reply. Just a chilly little tombstone in, no click. I have HR Desperation Vault 2 tagged in my Gmail. Understood what was going on behind those whispers in the break room from the glass walls, unexpected mid-level conversations behind closed doors, supervisors updating the Slack directory to find out who goes missing next. Rumor mill had gone wild. Some speculated insolvency, while some assumed it was a regulatory issues, with some even suspecting sabotage. This was tasty in its own right. I was not suspected because no one at Dellon had actually seen me before. Dana from operations, the person who consistently fixes items that bled but didn't raise a fuss working on the weekends without getting paid more. They never saw the entire system in her speech. The fault traps, pressure points, doors that I knew like my own fingerprint they believed I had discreetly left. They were unaware that I had departed loaded, and now, every anxious look over the shoulder, every secret, silent Slack thread, legal's frigid pings were all ghosts. They were unable to identify me, and I was not returning. Not to fix, not to consult, and not to mob was already in my proper location, and that they had constructed a foundation on my efforts. Had hardly begun to break at 9:12 a.m. Regarding the Dellen transaction, an email was sent. Final risk summary for the bundle. Plus red alerts it to a carefully curated list of authorized and business associates within Devlin's parent business and interred in the attached PDF, bolded and annotated, on page 17, and the fuse clause 14b was hyperl. Exclusiveness of non-transferable vendors agreements in terms that you have written. Actually, 2017 has moved up from being ignored to details to the full-on financial. I actually saw the guillotine land. You could sense the explosion at that moment. At 9:31, amid the quiet, I noticed our internal Slack chief's first ping General Counsel Deline. Just at 9:42, a complete red line review was ordered. A last-minute legal meeting was added to their internal calendar without a subject line by 10:15. A response was received by Arlo's senior partner. Email asking for a direct channel of communication with a person who is acquainted with old vendor Blake messaged me with one word about architecture. I replied, yes. And an hour later I was sitting in a safe video room, glasses that are pulled back on a neutral expression meticulously placed on top of the pleasure blazing beneath it. They didn't realize I would be going till I looked muted in the box. In the corner of the screen, they just strategically pulled advisor. The meeting began with formality, quiet voices, and everyone pretending that there was no gunfight. Devlin's attorneys appeared new. One of the eyeballs flashing in fright was the same colleague who previously informed me of the provision was not enforceable at scale. He appeared to have gone 3 days without sleep. Then, with composure, Marlowe's legal lead strolled them via the document, discovered a substantial obstacle to transferability under the current contract duties, particularly those outlined in Article 14b of agreements with several vendors describe. A non-transfer provision in the case of someone on Dine's side changes ownership. Disrupted. There has never been an issue. Before Blake leaned in, that clause voice is as smooth as black ice, which is as no one has previously attempted to purchase you. The attorney turned to the following slide, showed an underlined copy of the clause, my clause, and a column that, title, contracts at risk 47. Renegotiating at the starting prices there is probably a non-viable service disruption. Client retention is in jeopardy because this is presently categorized as Tier 1. I watched as they began to perspire. When the legal head muttered to off-screen, another executive started frantically typing. A woman in the backdrop displayed an image on The eyes of the second monitor widened as They were looking for a way as they scrolled around it in an attempt to unravel it, repair the damage that had already occurred. And then, the moment I had been waiting for, Brian arrived. His camera showed Keller's face. He clicked while gazing at the screen, gazed at the clause before noticing me. The beautiful recognition blossomed during the pause. Like a bruise on his jaw behind his eyes, his voice became tighter when it came to controlled, but the panic was audible. I didn't say anything throughout the pauses. Dana smiled and met his eyes without blinking. He glanced down at the screen and read, my initials were once more shown in the clause at the contract's bottom, reference DMT. He was fully aware of what I had done, and as I completed it, and at that moment, he understood that this wasn't because the boardroom was dissected and cut from glass and conceit. A picture of the skyline of sunlight struck the city that they formerly ruled. The shiny table as if it were attempting to draw attention to the guilty person I entered. With black folders with clean lines, created by Marlowe's team, no small conversation, no one introduced me. The air didn't need to be replaced. As soon as I entered the room, Brian Keller's seat suit was already more snug. Then I recalled my forehead sparkling just sufficient to reveal the strain when his eyes met mine. He froze and blinked. It took a second for the brain to refer to the picture using a file he croaked after thinking was long removed. Dana. Before I did, one of our partners spoke. This is our strategic partner, Dana Tilden. Advisor, she will supply the system and insight at the contract level for the review. Brian gave a slow nod, the type that occurs when your life suddenly changes. Your eyes and the sole object observing. Every shortcut you've ever taken is back. Didn't talk to me personally again. However, he made an attempt 2 hours following Marlowe's. The council examined each clause in detail, like a shovel of dirt over each other. Brian requested an assessment. Of Dellen's sidebar, "I want to talk to Dana, in private," he whispered with a low voice and palms. Like a preacher, they were squeezed together and asked. Blake glanced at me for rain, so I shook my head once, not irate nor arrogant, just completed. They clashed when the meeting continued. In an attempt to preserve leverage, sought to insist on value, made an effort to minimize the exclusivity. Provisions, license shortages, and audit lapses, but each time they made an effort to ground, we slightly tugged the rug, farther. And I didn't have to speak, because my silence was being choked by them. By hour 4, Devlin's attorneys appeared prepared to enter traffic. Brian was watching instead of talking. At the table, as though perhaps, if you examined closely enough, a better history would seem that the purchase didn't fall even though things didn't go as planned. Dreamed of massively renegotiated terms, reductions in valuation, no retention bonuses, title promises only a tighter, leaner asset acquisition without the bluster. As it was, I stood at the window. Completed, gazing out over the same horizon that I used to observe them kicking from the floor. I was offered $500 once they took me off of back, and a mop stated that I may still participate in the team, was now unable to pay for me, even understand how to communicate with me. I didn't deliver a speech without winking. I simply gathered my belongings for the monologue, gave the room a nod before leaving, but I scribbled a final line on the chalkboard of this entire terrible 3 days. I was worth the wonderful mess. I'm here to clean today, and I'll need $500 and a mop. How simply not in the manner that they... Many gratitude to you, ancient legends. Subscribe to Office Days to maintain the switch. Bringing the mayhem to life, your former boss is trembling while wearing their loafers.